Welcome. Welcome to all those who are joining us this morning in the sanctuary, and welcome to all those who are joining us online. Welcome to worship at First Met, a United Church congregation in the North Park neighborhood of downtown Victoria. We follow the way of Jesus, who leads us to serve with compassion and act for justice, and brings us together in the community of the church and beyond. We treasure the living, progressing Christian tradition. We creatively employ the sacred traditions of the Bible to express our spiritual experience beyond the bounds of creeds or beliefs. We interpret anew our ancient practice of prayer and worship. We embrace what is good in our religion and in others, and release what stands in the way of the law of love. We follow the way of Jesus, and we invite you to walk with us, just as you are. Thank you, and welcome.
It is my pleasure to have the first announcement, although my name is not Jackie. I'm Sheila McKinnon, I'm lead minister here, and my pleasure is to kind of introduce someone who's well known to some of you, and that's Blaine, who's right at the very front by Alan and Megami. Blaine Theory will be turning 92 this week, which is a prodigious achievement, sir. There are a couple of cards circulating through the congregation, and we would encourage you, please make sure you've had a chance to sign them before you go. Blaine came to Victoria in retirement with his beautiful wife, Elizabeth. Like many ministers, he served rural churches, but then, unlike many, for the last 20 years of Blaine's ministry, he worked with the Canadian Bible Society. After 10 years with the Society, they sent him on a trip to Africa. This engaged not just his spirit, but his heart. And like his sons, David and Don, after him, Blaine has been creating a legacy in Uganda with the work he has done there, including recently being part of a school build in which Blaine's name is on one of the walls. We salute that legacy with you, Blaine. I should say that after the second trip, which was in the second trip that the Canadian Bible Society sent Blaine on in '95 was to the USSR, and a very different city, places to be there. So Blaine and Elizabeth were here working with our congregation. Unfortunately, Blaine lost his dear Elizabeth many years ago. Her service was right here in this service, in this sanctuary. The service was led by Dr. Alan Saunders. And we're so grateful to son Don, to Megami and Alan for making this happen today. Barry Ralston is the visitor who has been there, but it took a son phoning from London, Ontario to wrangle our way to have Blaine with us this morning. I asked people about Blaine and Elizabeth because this was, of course, before my time, and I wanted to share just one of the responses I got. Blaine, the text begins, I had the pleasure of being partnered with Blaine as an evening volunteer at the Out of the Rain night shelter. Once a month on a Tuesday evening, Blaine and I met up at the church kitchen to serve and clean up a light supper to homeless young people who would spend the night in the fellowship hall. Blaine and I, writes Robin Brecken, had many chats as we worked together before the young people arrived. Our conversations were stimulated and varying, included our faith, homelessness, the Canadian Bible Society, his Scottish dance group, and his beloved family. When our guests arrived, Blaine warmly engaged them in conversation as we dished up hot soup and served food. Getting to know and work with Blaine was definitely a privilege. Robin signs off, "Happy birthday, Blaine." Blaine's first child, I'm told by his sons, was the church. The calling he received from God was profound and lifelong, that here he found his home and, in fact, lived out his mission. The Canadian Bible Society continues in so many countries to do important work of translating and distributing the scriptures, and we are grateful for people like Blaine who give their lives to them. I know that the Bible Society honors you and your contribution, Blaine. And so I asked at the Bible Society, what are the hymns that are represented and used to honor the Bible Society when they have gatherings? And my answer was, "How firm a foundation." And so we're going to sing just 2 verses of this traditional and heritage hymn. We can leave our masks on, but if you want to sing along, that's great. Thank you.
The announcements. Anyone wishing to donate flowers to First Met United Church for Easter Sunday in memory of a loved one, please contact the church office. Give them a phone call, send them an email. Or you can talk with Sheila or with the communications team. Memorials and flower memorials will be part of the Easter Sunday slides. And to add to that, as we are a cent-free, First Met has a policy that please don't have any lilies in your bouquet. Thank you. And for your information, those bouquets, if you donated one, you are more than welcome to take it home. And if you wish to leave it here in the church, they will be delivered to the shut-ins. And there is one other announcement. Is Joan right here? No.
It's right there. Everyone.
Joan, do you want? Oh, here it is. Yeah. Ever wondered what's downstairs? We'll join the tour immediately after the service. I understand that there are some slides around the history of ICA, and this is our opportunity to have it kind of explained to us. They've been a very prominent part of this building for many years. So I'll look forward to that.
Our beautiful grizzly bear reminds us that this is our chance now to take a moment to recognize the Lekwungen people on whose land we gather this Sunday and every Sunday, the nations we now know as the Songhees and Esquimalt. But this is a very important week in the life of the First Nations, the Inuit, and the Métis peoples of Canada, for this is the week they visited the Pope and received a long-awaited apology. We stand with them, and we know what it feels like to give the apology. Ours was given a long time ago, but we acknowledge how important that is for them. We also want to support others who have not yet stood up to pay respect to the Indigenous peoples, because it's one way all of our churches can work towards right relations. And as the Pope said, this is what Christ calls us to do. And so we recognize their territory, we recognize the cost imposed upon them, and we hope with them for the return to the vitality of language and culture, spirituality, and family life, for which they are working so hard today. Thank you. Now I invite Jackie up to speak as we light the Christ candle.
We light this Christ candle to light our way as we journey to Jerusalem, to the cross and to the tomb. May its light strengthen us where the road is hard, embolden us when our hearts lose courage, and bring hope as the road grows dark. As the gathered people of God, we center our hearts for worship, and we again begin our service with the Tenebrae liturgy, which dramatizes the gathering shadows as faithful to our Lenten journey. We approach Good Friday. After lighting them all, we will then extinguish them. As a faith-based community, we are committed to including people of all ages, economic circumstances, abilities, ethnicities, sexual orientation, and gender identities in all aspects of the life. The work of our ministry, and together we seek transformation, engagement, and service for ourselves, for our community, and for our world.
The story of Jesus includes many moments around tables, as this was part of his ritual of relationship, even to the last. In this 5th week of the Lent season, we will hear a story of love and devotion from the disciple Mary, directed at Jesus at the table. As we will see, Jesus tries to prepare his beloved companions for his death. Talk of death is like a gut punch to many of us. We would rather believe we and our loved ones are invincible, are able to will ourselves into being strong. We all know that isn't always how the story goes. We are fragile. Our lives, like the plants in the gardens we tend, are susceptible to elemental dangers and a life cycle of letting go in order to live. Let us pray together. Holy One, lover of souls, we call out to you. You know our tears and sorrows, and you bear the seeds of grief with us. Open us this day to your comfort that nurtures these seeds into sheaves of joy, the simple and good enough moments that fill our days. Amen.
This morning's reading is from John chapter 12, verses 1 to 8. 6 days, that's better. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, which is Jesus had raised up from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those who were reclining at the table with Jesus. Then Mary took a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume that she poured onto Jesus' feet. And then she wiped the feet with her hair. And the house was filled with a fragrance of perfume. But one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't the perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He was the keeper of the money bag. He used to help himself to it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. This is part of our story. Thanks be to God.
this week, Kyla and I were invited to Government House. It was my first time ever being in that rather spectacular mansion with its beautiful gardens and its sumptuous interior. We were there as the guests of Dr. Aaron DeVere. Well, I guess we were all the guests of the Lieutenant Governor, weren't we, Janet Austin? She was actually the first person to speak in our gathering, which was for Transgender Day of Visibility. And it's an important day, and Dr. DeVere is the current chair in transgender study at UVic. It's an importance about being visible and having allies. It's also stories of courage and the need to be safe. I know I speak for us both when I say we were impressed by the courage we saw on display. So they have a clear vision to which they are working, where all trans and gender diverse people would be free to thrive. But in the news, of course, we're always bombarded with the vulnerability of the trans community. It seems coincidental, doesn't it, that this week's title for our program from Dr. McPhee is We Are Fragile. Some parts of our society bear that fragility even more so than others. And so living out their mission to be inspirational, we heard from some of the people who had graduated from that program and were part of the allyship of that program. It was a wonderful opportunity for me and for many like me to learn firsthand stories that I had really never heard before, and to cheer on people who are living lives of amazing courage and vision. I don't want to make it sound like it was a dreary event. It wasn't. It was a time for us to meet people we'd never met before, with much laughter, telling stories of tremendous transformation and support from communities. And so it was an opportunity for us to have our trans flags, which they gave us, which are on the front right now, and to remember the families that are supportive. Some of them are families of choice. The children, the parents, the grandparents, the neighbors, people they have met on Zoom, who have been allowing themselves to open their hearts and arms and wear the visibility that allows others to feel safe. And so I came away recommitted to the work we're doing here in Affirm, to becoming an affirming congregation that allows us to support people like Dr. DeVere, who's an internationally respected scholar. His work has been translated into, I think, 12 languages, we'll say that, it may be more, and that who is internationally regarded and looked to and consulted in this very important academic field. And it's just one more way in which the world is catching up with some of these amazing young and older people. There was actually a boomer who spoke. And so it's moving history forward. And I was grateful that we got to be included in that event. And I wanted to share it with you. It's March 31st of every year. And maybe next year it will be something that we can do as we gather as a congregation. I wanted to start my sermon sharing that piece of news. And so we turn to this wonderful story. Jesus spoke the words nobody wanted to hear, which is the words that he wasn't going to always be around. And it wasn't spoken by anybody in hostility. It was spoken by someone who loved him, and then he acknowledged it. She spoke in actions. Christ spoke in words. We are fragile. It's a hard thing for most of us. We have more past than future. It's a funny thing. We're closer to 80 than 40, most of us, I think. And so what's the point of that? Well, the point is, from a spiritual point of view, that we recognize and live in that fragility, that thing called a lifespan. And we know that every day is a gift, and how we live it marks one more chance, as Blaine shows, to create a legacy. I don't know how it was in your family, if this is something you talked about. We had a couple of cardinal rules. Maybe some of you had them too. Speak no ill of the dead. Unless it was somebody we all agreed we would speak ill of. Then it was fair. But if you were critical of somebody else, then that would come up. My own mom, whom I had a very close relationship with, would never discuss even a sermon for her, a service. Would you like a particular hymn? Was all interpreted as hers. Oh, you want me dead. Now, when I was a teenager, I would have answered that differently. But I was already old enough to say, no, I don't want you dead. I just want to do the right thing. And then I would tell her the hymns I would choose if she didn't choose any on her own. But it is about admitting our vulnerability, and that's a hard thing for us, whether it's about choosing hymns or what we want done, or understanding that every day, which may of course be our last, we are creating a legacy. And can we do that in increasing comfort because we are people of faith? Can we talk about that with each other, with our loved ones, with ourselves? I think there are some advantages to being able to talk that way. There are some advantages to being able to talk about the fact that we have a limited time span, and help our children to know that from the very beginning, that it's not just when we've received a diagnosis or news. So it's an opportunity for us to not just be okay with the fact that we have a lifespan, but to be very comfortable with it. To know and respect that we have limits, that we all have limits. Sorry, I've moved away. Our vulnerability, the vulnerability of those around us then doesn't become a shock, right? It still becomes bad news sometimes. Of course, like our threshold moment said, sometimes lives are far too short. Sometimes questions are far too numerous. I saw a very interesting presentation by a university from the University of Minnesota, a professor saying that the press says we want closure after death. And her hypothesis is we don't want closure. Closure doesn't happen like that. We're given closure. Closure is that unfolding of the new chapter, however that takes, and it is a slower process. She said she thinks that when the press says, I hope the family gets closure with this revelation of what news they found or a sensing, she said they don't want closure, they want certainty. I thought that was a very interesting distinction. We do yearn for certainty, don't we? And of course, because we're fragile, we don't always have that certainty. And so, when we know that we're fragile, when we're even slightly 2% more comfortable with it, I believe we're more help to others in grief and our own selves in grief. You know, when you look at teenagers in their first major loss, it's the first time they felt that inside them. They don't even know how they're going to do it. And I'm sure that, like you've just ached for them. But as we grow older, we know how it is for us. We know what it's like to be in grief. And maybe like Mary, my goodness, she responded in an extravagant gift of love. An amazing thing. I was sharing with the chapel congregation my memory of a movie long, long ago called Babette's Feast. Do you remember that? All that amazing money, that beautiful course after course. And was it wasted on those people that ate it? Was Mary's perfume wasted on Jesus' feet? These are questions each one of us answers. For some, of course, Babette had made a foolish choice. For others, she was an amazing blessing and a continual challenge for us going forward. What would we do that would be an extravagant sign of love? It doesn't need to involve money. Mary spent her life savings on that moment of love with Jesus. Babette spent all she had. Those are two examples that are both financial extravagance. But there were other kinds of extravagance. I remember early in the pandemic, and you might too, opera in Italy. Do you remember hearing that opera singer? Remember him on the balcony every night? That's extravagant love. Also given to strangers, shared with us. We've seen many such examples during COVID. So I have a couple of blessings from Kate. And she says this: "Blessed are you who are attempting to love what is here, what is now. You who recognize the wonder and pain of looking at life's rearview mirror, at those things that are gone. The person you were, the quickness and sharpness of a body that doesn't tire quite as quickly, the relationships and jobs and aspirations, the people you can't get back. Blessed are you, holding the gentle compassion that wraps memories in grace. And blessed are you, turning your gaze from imagined futures that seem to call out with an unnecessary pressure and an urgency that wants to rob you of what joy still exists. Oh, and how blessed are you, drawing a tidy boundary around today and calling it home. For yesterday is a memory, tomorrow a mirage. Blessed are you, recognizing that the right sizing of reach and possibility is the heart's ease of God's good counsel, opening your eyes to all that is here. Let its beauty seep into your pores and whisper words of peace. Receive and welcome reality in its completeness, giving over to God all that is beyond your power to change or understand or return to once again. And in the meantime, embracing and loving the life you have, the family you have, the pleasures that are yours right now. Amen. We live at a time where much of the world is at war. We have responded in many ways. Our Sunday school is offering these strips for you to take home and place on your garden fence, so people walking by will know that you are thinking and praying for the people of Ukraine, those left fighting in the cities, and those millions who are fleeing in terror. It seems so unbelievable that just a number of weeks ago, those people lived in houses much like ours, lived lives much like ours, maybe even watched the same TV shows we watch. And so on top of our offerings that support the ministries here, pay for the heat, staffing, and outreach, part of the money given to the Mission and Service Fund has been funneled over to Kiev, has been funneled to Ukraine. We cannot rebuild without our prayers and without our support. We live in a world where many are at the limit of their strength. We bring our basket of offerings, or we've transferred them technologically, for the building of a community of caring and support of those workers that shares burdens, hoping that we may relieve the pressure and gladden their hearts. May this be so, as our offerings of time, talent, and financial resources is gratefully received and braided into the community of this faith and blessed. Amen.
Please join with me in the prayers of the people. O holy God, we live in a world that responds to power. The power of money, the power of celebrity, the power of influence, and the power of leverage, and the power of weapons. But your power, which the world often fails to understand, is a power beyond any of these, for it is the power of love. A simple power to change hearts and heal wounds and mend broken relationships, and gather us all into the eternal community. Forgive us that we have not all learned this, so that we often depend on the other kinds of power instead of yours. Grant that this may be a season of quiet discovery, in which we feel our hearts being strongly warmed and our spirits drawn irresistibly toward new possibilities and commitments. Whatever our way has been, show us a higher one. Whatever our dreams have been, give us better ones. And we shall continue to praise you through Christ, who followed you to his death and through your love experienced resurrection. This being our Lenten journey, we travel together through this time and await what may be for us around the corner. Amen.
thanking all the people that made it possible for Blaine to be with us this morning. And after the benediction, I would ask you all to turn to the cameras so that we may greet Dawn and David and their families in Ontario who are watching with us as we celebrate their dad's birthday. So, first, would you say with me, and now may the God who loves all of creation and you without price, and Jesus, our companion along this crooked path called life, and the Holy Spirit, who loves to improvise in surprising ways, go with you, dwell among you, and give you joy. Amen. Could I ask you to stand and face the cameras? Hello, Dawn and Dave, and your families. We love your dad. Thank you for sharing.